Welcome to Teaching Artist Podcast, a show dedicated to discussions of teaching art to kids, making art, and how those things overlap and feed each other. I'm Rebecca Potts, your host, a visual arts teaching artist. Hello, thank you so much for listening. I'm excited to share this conversation with Isadora Stowe, and I will be slowing down a bit and giving myself some time to wrap up this year and record some more fantastic episodes to share in the new year. I do have one more episode to share this year, which is a longer version of a curated presentation that I shared at the recent California Art Education Association conference. I hope you are also giving yourself grace and making time for whatever you need, whether that's early bedtime, relaxing with some TV, studio time, hikes in nature, or maybe something else. This has been a busy, difficult fall so far. But today is a good day, at least over here it is. My daughter got her first dose of the vaccine. Whew. Okay, on to this episode. Isadora Stowe shared her winding journey teaching in several settings before landing in community college, where she embraces the student-centered approach. She talked about learning on the job, how to connect with students and truly listen to find their unmet needs. It was so helpful hearing about the mindset shift from thinking of behaviors as problematic to thinking of behaviors as expressing something that may be painful and is not being heard. I also loved hearing about Isadora's work and how she pursues her interest in physics through installation in collaboration with scientists. She talked about making a living and making a life as an artist, creating multiple income streams, but also building in time to recharge yourself. Isadora Stowe is a New Mexican-based multimedia artist whose work focuses on the narrative of environment, translated and coded into complex psychological landscapes. Stowe grew up in the southwest border region, living and working in New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. She credits these experiences for providing a heightened awareness of geographical and political boundaries and a fascination with the exploration of identity, of self, and the construction of home in her work. Stowe earned her BFA in painting with a double major in cultural anthropology, a minor in Native American studies, and an MFA in painting and drawing. She exhibits her work widely and is represented in many private and public collections across the country and in Mexico. She has been the recipient of several grants, scholarships, and awards for her work, including an award for excellence from the New Mexico Committee of the National Museum of Women in the Arts. She is also one of the artists profiled in the book The Motherhood of Art, published in 2020. She is dedicated to making the world a better place for artists from all points of origin and serves on many local and national committees and on the board of directors for the Texas Association of Schools of Art and Border Senses, a nonprofit which promotes arts in the binational region. She is also the co-creator of the Professional Art Practice courses, Wearing All the Hats Without Losing Your Head, presented on the Artist Mother Network. Let's hear from Isadora. I am talking with Isadora Stowe today, and I'm excited to talk with you. I love to really start the conversation as sharing your journey. Could you walk us through how you got to where you are now in art, in education? What's the path?
Sure. I'm so excited to talk to you and get to talk about teaching, which I love, and art together, which are like two loves. So this is really nice. I was thinking about this a lot. I first started teaching Hebrew school, actually. I was asked to take over. The rabbi had left at our temple, and so I started teaching. And Hebrew was not my first language, so I had learned it from a very early age. So my remembering of how to understand it, it had become so intuitive. So just having to teach it, and I was in high school. So just having to kind of contextualize it and teach it to younger people was so interesting to me because it was like changing my brain. I was like, oh, how do you start from the thing and explain the thing? And I just feel like that's been the catalyst for everything. I'm like, oh, how do you get information to other people in a way that they understand, that resonates with them, that they can hold on to, and they can use it themselves. And then you get to watch them progress. That was kind of like the taste, it started in high school. And then in undergrad, I did a lot of teaching programs. So I did a lot of after school programs, and I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is, and still is, unfortunately, one of the poorest counties in the nation. And we are also one of the worst for education. So they had just started with these after school programs as a way to help working parents. And so it was an after school arts program. They had received a big grant. My friend had worked on it. And when I say a grant in the 90s, it was like we got crayons and paper. So that was big time for us. Like our schools are so poor. Our area is so poor. And so I had to be really inventive. And after a while of teaching the same thing to kids, I was like, well, what could I do? Like, how could we move our body and make art? And how could we? So I just had to get super creative. And I would actually credit growing up where I did with becoming a better teacher, because you have to figure out, well, how can I use cardboard and some charcoal to make a lesson plan and make it interesting for children who have never seen art before, and what can they do with it? And so I just had to get super creative with very minimal supplies. And also it taught me to ask. I would just go to stores and say, can you give me markers? Can I have 4 sets of markers for 400 children? It was real bare bones. So just that taught me a lot. And then when I graduated, I ended up teaching incarcerated youth, because the program that I was teaching with at the time, it was called At Risk. And it was students who were just in really kind of dire straits, and going home, they would go home to empty houses, no food, etc. And growing up, I grew up with a single parent. My mother passed away when I was young. I have 2 brothers and a sister. So we were not living like a kind of a normal life either. Resources were pretty sparse. So I really loved teaching that population because I knew it well, and I knew the struggles of what people were going through. And so incarcerated youth seemed like kind of a natural progression, because I had been working at this after school high school program with students who were kicked out of high school for becoming pregnant, or because of truancy, and sometimes truancy was because they were too embarrassed to wear the same clothes to school every day for 2 weeks. It wasn't, and I saw that very quickly because I was younger. And so it seemed like there was a lot of constraints for being punished for being in poverty. Right. And so I just found the arts to be this connective power. I would go into these schools and I would work with people, and they would just open up and brighten up and just relax. It was just a time for people to have this kind of connection. And I saw art doing that. And so, I was just hooked. It was just, so teaching art and making art were something that I was doing from a very early age. And then I worked for a violence prevention program for a grant that was to help people before they went into the juvenile justice system, which is completely corrupt in our state. I mean, I can say that out loud now because I really know the back end of a lot of things that were happening, and a lot of things that were going on and still go on with incarceration, and who gets incarcerated and why, and who really benefits from it. So I was working with violence prevention not to stop, but to help people before they got into school. And one of the things we did was we had the program at New Mexico State University. So we were taking students on campus and trying to normalize, after high school, you can go here, this can be your place. We can go into museums. That's your space too. And we did a lot of arts programming. And I worked with this director, Dr. Lisa Von Mappen, who's amazing. She went on to go to some other schools. She's now provost at other schools. And she was an incredible mentor, but she gave me a lot of freedom, and she gave me a lot of responsibility and trusted me to come up with a lot of curriculum. And it was just an incredible experience. And then I thought I wanted to go into public policy, but I took one statistics class and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not good at this at all.
No, thank you.
and I just want to make art. And so I went back to school for my graduate program. And then it was a teaching program. So I got to teach again, but I got to teach college students. And I was like, oh my God, there's no behavioral management, basically. Like the behavioral management aspect and modification was so much smaller than what I think I was kind of dealing with the kind of extreme end. So I was like, oh my God, this is like the easiest thing ever. So I loved it. And then when I graduated, I ended up working at UTEP, and eventually I received a full-time offer at a community college. And a community college for me was kind of like a bridge of what I had been doing, a lot of violence prevention and at risk, but it was also college. So it was like these two worlds that I loved so much together. And it's so student-centered pedagogy versus like university and colleges. So it was just a different way to kind of approach students than I had seen it at the universities. And I just fell in love. So that's where I am right now. And I absolutely love it. I love my students. I love getting to teach and bring art to people for the first time. I mean, that's like yeah, it's an amazing thing. So that's how I kind of got there, but I talked for a long time.
But there was so much. I love hearing about the variety of all the different teaching experiences that led you to where you are, and having sort of both ends of where you are now, working with slightly younger students in like really difficult situations, and then slightly maybe same age, but like university versus community college. It's interesting to hear that slight shift, like what the differences are there, and just kind of finding your spot, finding your little what fits for you. I feel like that can be really hard.
I think when you're teaching too, you got to try so many different things until you figure it out. Like I didn't understand what community colleges did until I taught at one, and I was like, oh, this would have been so helpful for me, because I think a lot of the things that I really struggled with in college were things that I just didn't know about. And not having a strong, our educational system in Mexico is so bad. So not having a strong understanding of just even how to study, like just how do you take notes? How do you take a test?
Right.
I mean, there were just so many basics. And so I think at a community college, we're always instilling like all of these really basic habits in rigor, and how do you support students in the best way. And then we have all these services, and it's so student centered that we're really looking at them and how they're growing individually. Whereas when I taught at a university, it was like sink or swim. Like you come to class and you do the thing, and you didn't come to office hours, or and it's not that we baby people in community college, but we're noticing. We're like, hey, you haven't been here for a week. What's going on? Like, you got this grade on this test, and I saw you were in here in class every week. Like, why? What's going on? Let's look at your notes. Let's look at what's happening, and just having a conversation with people. And I would not do that at a university because it wasn't part of the culture. And I mean, I remember even being told, like, we're trying to weed people out. So you need to have this very strict attendance policy, and you need to be, and my grading was like so intense. Like I look at some of the projects people did, they were winning awards for student projects at that university because they were working. I mean, they were gorgeous, but they were working so hard. And I had so many students crying in my class, and like, that's not the educator I want to be. That's that's not how I want to focus my energies with people and connect with people. I don't think there's a wrong or a right way to do it. It's just that fits better with my personality, is being able to have that kind of human connection and be in dialogue and relationship with students all throughout the semester, and they're not a number. I know everybody's name. I know all my students, and I see them in the hallways, and I know that who struggles with trying to buy the art supplies, and I know who's had a parent who just passed away and is taking care of kids, so it's just it's just maybe a more intimate relationship with your students in a way. And then being able to be like, well, here's the 4 different places that can help you with that. And we have a food bank, and here's this, and here's that. Whereas at university, it was kind of like, you're not my responsibility, in a way. Not that it's a fine line too, but I just think there was a different kind of relationship that the administration nurtured at a university versus at my particular community college in El Paso.
Yeah. And I could even see that like high schools don't have all of those resources. So I could see that being very frustrating to be working with students that you personally relate to. You're like, I've had similar struggles.
Yeah.
I get it. I care about you, but like, I don't have any resources for you.
Right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a terrible place to be because I think educators at the heart of it, like we don't do this job because it's easy. Like
Right.
we do this job because we care deeply about the education of young people and we want people to be their best. And so I've never met a teacher who's not trying very hard to do all those things for people, you know, or who doesn't want to. So I think that when you're supported by your administration, it's just so much more helpful because you're probably doing it anyways. I know we're all spending our own money on our students anyways, but it's very helpful when we have that support to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear maybe more about, you talked about the violence prevention program that you were working on. I feel like it could be helpful maybe for other educators to hear, like if there's any sort of bits of curricula or lessons, anything that kind of sticks out that could be replicated in other places or useful for educators.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the biggest things was taking in consideration the emotional health of the students, I think, in violence prevention, because I think especially males, marginalized males, can feel very like school is not their place. And it can come out as being very reactive and aggressive. And this is true for my female students too. But I think that creating a safe environment, like people just want to be heard and respected, and they're going to test those boundaries and they're going to be reactive because they don't know what a safe place is a lot of the times. Like they're not coming from a safe place, and you have to model it, and you have to model forgiveness, and you have to model emotional intelligence and communication and really love. Like you have to just be looking at people through that lens and looking at somebody being reactive and aggressive and saying awful things to you as somebody who is in a lot of pain, and how best can you serve them in a way that would help with that pain and help to model that you are a safe person for them. I think that's, once you get that going, no matter what you're doing in the classroom, once you have a respectful place and a safe place for people, everything else is just so much easier. And I think that, and I don't know, because it's been a long time since I've been out of school, but I don't know how much that was something I learned on the job. It wasn't something that was ever taught to me. So, and I also, I recently did a year-long training for safe zone classrooms. And I think that's kind of open to anybody and LGBTQ plus. And it's really about creating these kinds of spaces where everybody from any kind of marginalized background feels like they're in a safe place. And I felt like I can use that, you know, in every single aspect. And one of my favorite things is, so the Rainbow Coalition were the catalysts, the people who trained us in El Paso, and they have this incredible place. But she had this rule, and I just love it. And I use it all the time. And it's the vaguest rule. It's what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom, you know, like you can take out lessons learned, but we all get to be wrong in here. We all get to try things. We all get to fail. We all get to say things and take those things back. But we're going to always assume that everyone's doing the best they can with what they know. And I think that just having that kind of a safe culture and creating that kind of culture, and it means that you have to be on all the time. It's like, I can't walk into my classroom and be like, oh, this is going to be I'm really tired from the night before and I'm just not feeling it. So I'm not going to really say anything when somebody says something. And when this happens, like you got to be on it, because they see if you're not consistent, they're watching you all the time, and you got to make sure that you're being respectful and holding everybody accountable, not in a negative way, but just being like, well, hey, you said that, but you know what? That could be interpreted as, or what did you really mean by that? Are you trying to say X, Y, Z? So you're walking people through things like with the benefit of the doubt. And I think that at the beginning, when I was first teaching, I had a lot of behavioral issues and with young men. And I was like, what is that? Is it because I look super young? Is it, you know, what am I doing? And then I just decided one day that student on that first day, because sometimes you have a first day and you're like, oh no, this guy's, he's gonna be so bad all year. Oh God, he just doesn't want to. I'm like, that's going to be my best student. And at the end of the year, that's the person at the end of the year who's like, oh my God, I loved your class. You know, it was so great. And I love him. And it's playing to people's strengths too. If you got someone who's talking all the time, all right, well, what is it that you feel like you're not being able to say, and what do you need to say? And it's just like, it's figuring out what are problems, meaning like I'm saying that in quotes, like the problem student or whatever the issue is that's being disruptive, and how do you play to the strength of that person? What's the real need underneath that? And I think once you start recognizing that and empowering people who feel disempowered in a lot of ways, everything else just kind of falls into place. Then it's just your curriculum. It's just like, how do I want to have fun and learn this objective? All right, I'd like to do this. And let me ask them too. Like if I'm stuck on things, I do have a lot of anonymous assessments too. So it's a lot of like, how are we doing? How was that project? What did you feel about that project? Where was the muddy areas? What parts did you just not understand? And I do that in the middle of a project and after. And then I do like a wish list. Like if we could do anything in this class, what would that look like? And they'll put that in anonymously. And I'll look at that and then we'll talk about it and then we'll vote on it and we'll come up as a class, like what that project would be. And I only do that once because it's very hard to do that in a semester, like all your projects. But I do that as our final project. Like what would be interesting to you guys and how could you do more research outside and like, how would that look? And then they're bringing their new ideas to me. I mean, so it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just getting them involved too, but really you got to have a place where people feel safe or nothing good is going to happen in that room. So I think that's for violence prevention, for people who are really hurting and don't have those skill sets. It's modeling those skill sets and learning those skill sets. There's a fantastic book called Nonviolent Communication. I think his name is Mark Rosenberg who wrote it. And there's actually the Nonviolent Communication seminar in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I didn't know that when I read the book. I was like, I'm going to go someday. But that book was amazing. I read it 5 times because this is somebody who he worked with the Arab and Palestinian conflicts with Israel. And he did a lot of he had conversations with people, and the way he addresses people with so much love through this lens of like, how do we come to a resolution for people who are diametrically opposed on these things? So it's extremely interesting. And if he can do that, like we can do it in our classroom,
Yes.
So it was super inspiring. I thought just about how do you have conversations with people where they can feel heard and it's respectful and everybody, I hate that win-win, but everybody feels like that they're walking away positively and that they were heard. It's easy to say that, but that's a hard thing to practice and do consistently in the classroom. So I'm constantly trying to learn about that. Like, how do I make that better for my students?
Yeah. And it sounds like it's also like there's a mindset shift there for the teacher. I love, what you said about, I feel like almost probably every teacher can relate to that, walking in on the first day. And there's students that stand out, whether, good reasons or bad reasons, but the students that you're like, ooh, this one's like disrupting. And just a little mindset shift of, well, what need is unmet there?
Yeah.
How can I engage this person where they are and connect with them? What do I need to do that? Yeah. Rather than sort of, I don't know, marking them as like, okay, that's the one to watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they become your best
huge.
teacher. It's like, in Buddhism, it's like, who's your holiest teacher is your biggest enemy. It's like the person who they have the most to teach you. Those are my students who have taught me so much. Yeah, maybe this is a very too structured of a room, like maybe this is, they had good points. And so I just feel like we get so much out of that too, if we're really listening, if we're going to be open to listening to it. Sometimes you just can't. You got other things you got going on, but
Yeah, and you're right that can be so hard. And I love that you just said that there's so many other things going on, because I know you also have a lot of other things going on, other amazing courses that you're teaching. You have incredible art career. And I mean, I would love to get into all of that as well. Maybe if you could talk about some of the other ways that you're teaching and reaching people outside of the work at the community college.
Yeah, I would love to because,
Yeah.
oh God, it's such a passion. So, Kaylin Butine, who is from the Artist Mother podcast and the Artist Mother podcast network and critique groups, she does so much.
So much.
So much. She has so many hats. We had this wonderful relationship that started when I had her come to my college, and she gave talks, and then I connected her with New Mexico State University, and she did a podcast there. And then we had an exhibition in Mesilla, New Mexico, with artists from all over New Mexico. So I got to work with her. I just had heard her on the radio, and I was so inspired by her. I was coming back from a show at Colorado State University, a solo show. I'm a single parent. I had driven up, and one day I flew out a friend to help me install, and they had 5 people installing. We installed for like 3 days. I'm not sleeping. And then I got to drive back and teach, and be with my child. So I'm driving in the car, and the Artist Mother podcast is coming on, and I'm like, these are my people. I'm like, oh my God, and I was like, I love this woman. I got to get her to New Mexico and Texas, and she's got to talk to my students who are, dealing with all these things. And so we made it happen. Anyways, it's just started this wonderful friendship. And I did a lot of the crit groups with her. We decided to open up this course, Wearing All the Hats, as a professional practices course, because, I love artists and I love teaching, but women identifying artists who are mothers who are trying to do this artist life and teach and do all the things when the world expects so much of us. It's such a passion to be able to help artist mothers kind of navigate the professional world, because it's all stuff that I never had one class of professional practices in my undergrad graduate school. And everything I learned, I had to take business classes and marketing classes, and they were never geared for artists because, I don't know, in the 90s and 2000, they didn't exist. I couldn't find them. So it's just been a self-education of like, I wanted to move into public art, and I wanted to move into licensing, and I wanted to exhibit my work all over the world, but not live in New York City and pay that rent. And I was a single parent, and I'm from the poorest county. I don't have the contacts that, somebody living in maybe Seattle or anywhere else would. So I was like, how do I make a life for myself? And I just had to figure it out through trial and error and investing and time. And so has Kaylin. Like, she started the Artist Mother podcast because she was very isolated as well. And she wanted to connect with other artists. And how do you do that when you're living in the middle of nowhere, in terms of like the art world? And so, which we also break down is a myth in itself. But so we created this class, Wearing All the Hats, and it was a 20-week class the first time, and now we've kind of pared it down to 12 weeks, and we're going to start it again in January of 2022, our third course. We go through everything. Like, we go through, how to do inventory, documenting your work, how to do exhibitions, grants, give an artist pitch or your elevator pitch, how to write your artist statement, how to take care of your finances, like every single aspect that we could think of that would be helpful. We have created a curriculum for that. So we have this course, and then we have accountability partners, because we also believe that if you have somebody else, if we can connect you too, so now you have artists that you're connected with from all over, and you guys can be accountable to each other, because, nobody has time for inventory in your studio. I don't know anybody who's like, I can't wait for some inventory this week, or documenting my work, or, putting my proposals together. Like, we don't have time for it, but it's such a necessary part of what we do. And, so if we have other people we can support with who are also taking care of their children and working another job or just starting out, so it's really this place for artists to thrive and really understand all the ins and outs of the professional aspects that we are not taught in schools. So yeah, that is this huge passion for me, Wearing All the Hats. And we have a website, wearingallthehats.co.com was taken. So it's .co. Oh. But you can find out more there. But we love to work with artists, and we're actually going to start expanding it. So it's not just artist mothers, because I have a lot of single parents who are male artists and my community, and a lot of people I know who don't fit as artist mothers, but are taking care of their parents. They have people who are dependent on them. And so we're trying to expand and make more room for kind of everyone who is wearing multiple hats,
Yeah. We were talking a little bit before we pushed record about how artists do so much. Like, on the one hand, I feel like it's a really difficult career. Like, it's hard to actually earn a living as an artist. So we have to be doing many, many things to, support a family, support kids, support, being a caregiver for your parents even. There's just so many hats that I feel like most artists wear.
Yes.
And yeah, I absolutely I talk about Artist Mother podcast here too, and love what Kaylin's done, love what you're doing. So yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's this farce that you can live full-time off your work. Like, the percentage of people who do that is so tiny. And the people who do that full-time without any other job is like tiny, tiny, tiny. Like,
right.
So it's not realistic. It's like saying, I'm going to go to Hollywood. I'm going to be Reese Witherspoon, and I'm going to it's the same thing in the arts, but it's just not talked about in art school enough, I think, to prepare people for what it really takes, the work ethic it takes. I went to school with so many incredibly talented people, blew me out of the water. And that's not what they're doing now. They're doing other jobs. And it's heartbreaking because it's not an easy life. And so how do you figure out how to make that life work? Because, art never leaves you. Like, you can try to get rid of it. Good luck. Like, it's always there, you can stop it for 5 years and you're like, you come back and it's still right there. So I think that trying to manage it and figure out how to make a life that honors that and honors your time and your sanity is every artist's goal, right? For the rest of our lives, I think.
Yeah. And how have you done that? Like, how do you manage all these things?
Oh my gosh. With a lot of loving support from friends. That saved me, I think, because I can call up an artist mother and she can talk me down, when I'm like, I tried to do this thing and it didn't work, and why, and it'll never happen again. I think sometimes, there's so much rejection. We're dealing with rejection all the time. And we're working so hard, and we're not getting things all the time, which is expected. But what I mean by that is I think artists, out of most people, have a very healthy relationship with rejection just because of the nature of what we do. We have to, or we wouldn't be doing this stuff. But I think it's because art is a marathon, and it's like, you can be working so hard on something and just see that project not go through, or something that you wanted to do, a relationship with a museum, and something was going to happen, but it happens a different way. And that's just not how the work was intended to be. There's just so many different aspects of it. I think having that support group, and then really understanding what self-care means to you. Like, that has been my biggest kind of aha. So I do transcendental meditation and I hike. And those two things, I hike meaning just I have to be outside. Exercise. I think that would just equate for exercise. Those two things will keep me sane for when there's so many emails and so many texts and phone calls and deadlines and people asking for things. And I'm like, I just can't have another person asking me for something. Oh my God. So if I go and I do a hike and I come back, I'm like, oh, life is amazing. It's like, it resets me so that I can just kind of tackle what I can tackle. And I think the meditation too, it's like starting out in the morning intentionally with this kind of energy and gratitude. There's this great book, and I don't have it with me, but I can send you the name of it. But she has these gratitude exercises that you do, and those are extremely helpful. So if I'm working with maybe somebody who, like in administration, who is not, helping us with our facilities or whatever kind of thing that I'm working against as like contrast, as something that I'm really dealing with as causing stress, I go into this gratitude practice of placing their name and being thankful for them, and just thinking about it differently helps me to move through the stress of dealing with difficult people, difficult circumstances, seeing the good in those circumstances, because they're just like, as an educator, and in the arts, we are not valued. That's just like culturally. And in a capitalist society, artists are not really valued. And if you're a woman, and then the layers that you start to place on it, these are real things. that really exists. So how do you deal with a world like that? Well, you have to make yourself whole and give yourself that time and that peace and that energy in different kinds of ways. So you can go back out there and just be the best that you can be. And then, Caitlin's really good at this. She will have really good boundaries about work. And I have found that I am not in a situation where I can do that so much as a single parent and as the person who has the only job in the household. But there are ways that I've been able to scale it. So there's things that I've worked on in order to kind of create these kinds of boundaries, like trying not to answer people back after 5. Like, why are you texting me from work at like 10 o'clock? That's not okay. But usually I'd be like, well, here's the thing. And so, it takes a lot out of me to be like, okay, on Monday, I will text this person back, So just trying to set up those kinds of boundaries and then just being really cognizant of what makes me feel good. Like, I love baths. I love sushi, like there's just things that if I do that for myself when I'm having a harder day or I've accomplished something, that's really helpful. And just celebrating when you do something that has taken a lot, just take that time to reflect and be like, man, that was a lot that you did. I think you deserve those shoes, like somehow, these kinds of rewards, because I think time can just slip away because we're just working so hard. So taking time for yourself is important, but that's something I've had to look. I feel like it wasn't until I hit my 40s that it just really dawned on me to do that. And that's helped so much. Wish I knew that sooner.
I know. I feel like I'm still working on it. And I hear Caitlin talking about removing email from her phone or, setting it up to have like a whole month off at some point. And I'm just like, how does that work? How can it's not possible yet, but it's definitely a goal.
Yes.
Something to work towards. How do I make that happen? But definitely so important. I feel like when you're juggling so many things, I think of it often, teaching art and making art go hand in hand, but it's also sort of this navigating 2 careers at the same time.
Yes.
And when you're doing that, when you're trying to sort of navigate these dual careers that intersect in some places and totally don't in other places, when can you fit in time for yourself, time for your family, time that isn't 2 careers?
Exactly. I mean, we're running simultaneously like a full-time business and we're teaching a full-time job. And then we have all of our other responsibilities. And I think people don't necessarily understand that. Like if you're not in the arts, you don't get what we're doing. We are eat, sleep, breathing this stuff all the time.
Ooh, yeah. So hats off to single parents too. Just managing it without that support is incredible. And just that added challenge, added layer of like, you don't get time off from parenting. There's no, not that I necessarily do, but I can say, hey, buddy, like it's your turn.
Yeah. I think too, the thing I do miss is someone being like, oh yeah, that's a reason you are having a reasonable response to your child saying that, like I think the backboard is what I really miss. And that's where I think a lot of my friendships come in because they're like, yeah, you did a lot, or, maybe he shouldn't have said that to you. That's not okay. And you did the right thing by doing XYZ, I need to check in to make sure I'm like, I know I hate to be so linear with my thinking and being like, this is the right way to do it and I know what's best, because I feel like there's always room to see things from a different perspective. So that is what I do miss a lot. And another income, that would be great. Like somebody else's income. I would really like somebody else to handle those bills. That would be fantastic.
Oh, yes. So helpful.
Hey listeners, I'm jumping in here because I have an ask of you. If you are enjoying the show, I would so appreciate your support. I'm humbled and grateful for all the interest in this show over the past several months and for the messages I've received letting me know that this podcast has resonated with you. It has been so inspiring to hear from you. Thank you. This podcast does take time, effort, and resources to share with you every week. And I plan to keep it going and stay focused on highlighting and inspiring artists who teach, while also continuing to grow this community and dreaming up additional ways to help you. One way to accomplish this is through direct listener support. Your support would really help the show and community grow. So I've set up a link where you can quickly and easily support the show. The whole thing will take less than 60 seconds. It's at anchor.fm/teachingartistpodcast/support. You can contribute $1, $5, or $10 per month. If Teaching Artist Podcast is a part of your week and you love what we're doing, please consider visiting anchor.fm/teachingartistpodcast/support, or just clicking the link in the show notes and supporting us in any way that you can today.
I would also love to get into your artwork and just hear more about your work.
Yeah. Well, I'm trained as a painter. My dad retired as a printmaking professor, so I grew up with printmaking. So I use a lot of it in my work. Recently through screen printing, and painting and drawing 2D is kind of my absolute love. If I walk into a museum, I almost just don't even see the 3D stuff. I'm like, I'm that kind of a 2D person, but I've moved into 3D and 4D, which is kind of interesting because now that I start to look at things a little bit differently. And I heard this thing that after you have children, that a lot of women move into 3D. And I just thought that was kind of interesting what that correlation is.
I've seen that too. Oh.
Right? Like, because I was like, I remember walking through huge sculptural installations and people talking about them. I'm like, oh no, that wasn't there in the room. They're like, yeah, that was there. I didn't even register. But now I'm starting to understand it a lot more. So I've started using a lot of those different concepts in my work, and I used a lot of video, and I have this iconography that I use in my painting and my screen printing. And that's either painted on the wall or projected on the wall and then projected in video mapping. So I worked with the UTEP electromagnetic lab, and they were doing video mapping. And I worked with my friend Laura Turan, who's also interested in doing that. And she helped me a huge amount. So we made these videos where the images of my iconography are projected onto shapes of the images in my iconography, which I'm like, I don't know if this makes sense. And I use a lot of light in my work. And also my artwork has light sensitive paint. So the layers change based on the light. And then in the installations, the light will also change what the work says. So there's all these different layers, and then all these different layers start to appear. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I love hearing about the light. I feel like it's something we probably have to see. I will definitely be linking to your website. And do you have videos of kind of like what that looks like and how that works?
I have stills from it, but I do on Vimeo, but they're not linked to. But by the time you link it, they will be linked to my website.
Cool. Yeah. And then also I imagine there's an element of engineering, sort of science, like figuring out how to make this stuff work. Yeah. And you mentioned working with a partner. Is that person also an artist, or is that like...
Yeah, she's an artist.
She works.
And she's a friend, and she's one of the people who I flew out to Colorado because I was like, cool. Can you help me make sure that this all runs smoothly? So luckily she was there, and there were all these issues because I planned this show at Colorado State University and Amnesis it was over 2 years maybe. And, I wasn't physically there. So I had to have the curator take videos and do measurements. And so even with measurements and videos and understanding what kind of projector they had and how we configured it, like we were working on it for a long time. And I would set it up in my studio to make sure it would all work the way that we said. And we got there, of course, like all this stuff did not work. So she was like reconfiguring it. And I'm like cutting out all these Mylar shapes and putting them up. But they had like 5 or 6 people helping us at any given time. So it was fantastic. But, it's stressful because that stuff is
Mhm.
so site specific. Like you can account for everything, and there's always going to be 2 inches off. There's going to be all these little
Right.
contingencies like you cannot account for, even though I was trying really, really hard. And I just didn't have the time to fly up and go through and, and then come back down. And it's expensive. And even though they did give me a research grant, but I couldn't, to take off that time with a child. So it's always the juggling, like, but yeah, it's really interesting because I was working with, these scientists at UTEP, and we're trying to figure out, he's trying to do what I'm asking him to do. And then there would be all these accidents that would happen when he would do it. And I was like, oh, but I love it. Now there's a shadow. He's like, no. You said it should be like this. And I just thought it was so funny because I kept loving all the problems and he was getting frustrated with me. So I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And it can show like 4 different layers of a shadow. He's like, no, but we just want one. I'm like, oh no, that's amazing. So it's just kind of funny, just the way they work and the way I worked. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure he was just like, oh, artists, they don't really care. But no, I just didn't know it could do that. If I knew it could do that, I would have said yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes with it. And then just the install of my pieces, and because they're site specific, it takes forever to paint a room. Usually the gallery or the university, they'll paint the place before I get there. And then like the first coat of the color, and then I'll paint the images on top. And then usually I'll have assistants helping me with that place to draw, like I'll draw the outline and then they'll fill it in with paint. But I still got to go over and make sure all the paint, is okay. So they're very they take a long time to install, but once they're installed, they're amazing. And then what I want them to do is that all the pieces, once the pieces are out, they still stand alone. They're still strong enough. So for instance, a couple of pieces in that show in Colorado are now in public installations in different places in New Mexico. And they look completely different than they did when they were installed in the installation, but they still work and they still glow in the dark and they still do all the things just on their own. So that's a really happy place that I've gotten to in the work for me, and that everything can kind of stand on its own, but put together, it kind of creates a whole nother layer.
Right. Yeah. And then you also do some licensing and you're working on it.
Yes, I'm starting on it. I'm trying so hard. I have a coloring book that I've created and COVID hit. And so I was talking with this one major company and it didn't work out, but I haven't really gone back to it because we had to switch over, as everybody probably listening knows. We had to switch. I had to teach studio classes online that had never been taught online before. So I had to redo all my curriculum, and we were shuffling so much that it took up so much of my time. So now I finally feel like, in the next 2 months, I'm going to be able to go back to everything in terms of licensing, just because COVID took up. I was also teaching my son at home, and, it was a lot. I made a lot of physical pieces, but I just couldn't stand to be on the computer any longer than I had to for my job. So, and licensing and working with the computer and manipulating images is tons of time in Photoshop. And I didn't have the bandwidth for it the past couple years, but it's an absolute love. And I have some of my work on the covers of books, which is really nice, things like that. But what I really want to do, I really want to do textile design and a lot of other stuff. So I have the catalogs, I have the lookbooks. I just need to get them to the right people. So I've done all the legwork, but that's like I don't know how to explain it, but I love making art, but that's kind of like I don't know if I want to say hobby. That's not a good word, but it's like a passion project, I guess. So I can't wait to get back into that. But everything else has to come first. I have a big show coming up at Western State University. So I'm working on that. And as soon as that's up and all my curriculum's done, because now we had to move everything to hybrid, then I can get into that. That's like the frosting. So I just got to get all the other stuff done. And that's kind of on the back burner. And we're launching another course. And
you have, I've heard it put like the big rocks and then the little stones. So you have like your big rocks are the things that come first. You've got to get these done, and then you can kind of trickle in everything else.
Yes, I love that. That's so much better said. Yeah.
But I guess where I was thinking with that is just a few, like one is talking about how artists make a living, that you're making this big, complex, beautiful installation work and you're showing it and you're, like getting grants around it. You're doing really, I mean, I feel like that's sort of in my long-term goals. Like someday I would be there, getting grants for my work and having these big shows like that. But then you're also continuing to make sort of, I'm not sure the right way to put it. Like I was thinking these somewhat smaller sellable one-off pieces. And then also working towards like licensing deals and the design side of things. Just having so many fires burning feels almost like a necessity for artists.
Yes,
but so hard.
Income sources. Like you have to have all these different things coming in. I think, I sell some work on Saatchi and they sell prints of my work because I don't have the time to make the physical prints of my work. So I sell work that way. I sell work to my collectors that I'm constantly trying to network and connect with. I make work to sell with interior designers who I have relationships with corporate places who sell to corporate art, who I have not sold yet through, but they do ask for a lot of pitches. And I'm like, at some point, someone's going to want one of these pitches because I'm really good on these pitches. So I know it'll happen, but so I'm working on that. But, breaking into each one of these has taken years and it takes understanding, like, how do you make a correct pitch and how do you, and then there's the licensing and the lookbooks and learning all of the software. Like I've been just taking classes and classes and classes with Shannon McNabb, who's a textile designer, just trying to understand all of this stuff so that I can understand these different industries. Because I think you have to have multiple income streams. And, there's many different reasons. One of which is I never wanted to depend on my work when I was first making it as a source of income because I really felt like it would change the work. That is my own perspective. And I think that is a limited perspective. I don't think that everybody needs to have that. But one of the things I did was every year I would have money set aside in my income taxes. So, and I still do, so that at the end of the year, I would get this check. It would be money that was essentially saved for me. And I would put it in my bank account for my artwork. And then that went strictly to supplies and buying what I needed. So I didn't have to feel like I needed to budget that stuff because sometimes I'm like, oh, I really want to work with this paper. Or I really want to work with this thing. And I don't want to have to check my budget and be like, oh, I can't believe I just spent this on this. I wanted this kind of free money so that I can play. Like I don't have to. And I have a sculptor who makes all my work. So I have to be able to pay him. He makes all the substrates. So he makes all the wood circles and all the things that I work on. So I didn't want them to come out of grocery money or money for my kiddo and things that he needed. Right. So I did it that way. And then anytime I sell, make money, I put that back in. And so then the work just grows more and more. And then I can buy, I can start to take money out and buy nice things or I paid for something that was very expensive this year. And, there's different things that now I'm able to actually buy with my art income that are things that just feel like luxuries and feel so amazing. So, but I have a careful relationship with that because I think that the money aspect for artists it's a slippery slope. And there is an amount of money I do need to make now to support my bills. So there is money that goes just there, but then there's also money that comes out of that where I get to re-landscape my backyard and things like that. So I think that artists and money and our relationship with money, it's so hard when you're making work and figuring out what that amount of money that you need to make in order to make it a thriving kind of business that you can continue to put money in, even if it won't make anything for like 5 years or whatever it is, So yeah, multiple income streams. And then I take a lot of money classes. I read a lot of books about money and redefining my relationship with money. Because when you grow up with a scarcity of money, it's very hard sometimes to rationalize, well, $400 on paints, what? So I think understanding that situation and just having a different relationship with it has been very, very helpful to becoming more in an abundance mindset. So.
Yeah, I feel like there's 2 layers to that mindset shift too. There's, spending so much money because art supplies are not cheap, but then also asking for, if you're gonna sell something or you're presenting a talk or, whatever it is that you're doing, I have so much trouble with pricing because a lot of times the mindset that I'm trying to kind of get out of is like, well, I couldn't afford it.
Right.
And it's like,
Yes.
yeah, but I'm not my customer. Like,
Right. Yes. And I've gone to that point too. I'm like, I'd never be able to buy this stuff. Yeah.
right.
But yeah, there's so much to that, and thinking about
Yeah.
it and thinking about your work, and just the minimum is just thinking about how much time, energy you put in and paying yourself minimum wage. It's like that thing
Right.
costs so much. And then if you throw in the student loans and all that other good stuff.
Ooh.
But yeah, we do a whole week on pricing, and because there's so many layers to it, and how do you continue to mark up your prices, and what does that really mean?
Mhm.
And yeah, that emotional aspect to it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so tricky. Yeah. And it's on my list to make time to take the course. At some point, I will be there. Yeah, it's been so good just hearing more about how you're sort of managing all of these things and the amazing work that you're making. I will link to all of it. I also like to ask a couple of, I think of them as get to know you questions, even though we've already kind of gotten to know you. So big, broad question. What are you curious about?
Oh, I am so curious about physics. I'm just always reading about it and listening on podcasts about it. And it's just so hard for me to wrap my head around, but I'm very interested. And I have a lot of great book recommendations, but I have to read them over and over again because I don't understand them. But I'm very interested in physics and quantum mechanics and, things that are just so incredibly interesting to me. I'm just so interested in how our world works and how we make meaning. And so physics kind of go along with that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. And I love that for the project you were talking about, that you got to work with a scientist who was it's an interesting, like hearing that relationship too, and just the mindset they have versus sort of an artist mindset where it's all just experimentation and being open to like, oh, what happened now? Let's go with that. Yeah. But being able to incorporate that into your work and have help from people who maybe do understand it more.
Yes.
I feel like that must be incredible.
Yes, I'm looking forward to collaboration more with scientists. Yeah, I just love how people think differently. I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom used to teach science and math at the high school level and would talk about how sometimes students would have sort of a breakthrough because they didn't know the rules, because they were kind of like thinking outside of the box, being able to come up with these sort of discoveries because you're not already sort of narrow in your thinking.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where artists come in too.
Yes. And have you noticed that too with teaching art? I always felt like my non-majors, I was like, oh my God, they had such an interesting perspective and just openness in different kinds of ways that I loved. Yeah.
Yeah. I find that with elementary, they're kind of all there. Yeah. It's amazing what they come up with. I'm always inspired looking to them for inspiration, and the color. I don't know. For me, color is a huge thing. So the ways they put colors together, the ways they mix colors is just incredible.
Yes, I had my son in my studio all the time. I was like, what do you think about this stuff? I copied a lot of his stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing that now with my daughter just got the little, I don't know what they're, perler beads, I think is what they're called. The little like, you carefully line up all these little plastic beads and then iron them to stick them together.
Oh, we were super into those in my house. Yes, my son. We made
He's
a million.
Loving it.
They are great because they take up a lot of time.
Yes. But I'm loving like the combination. She's, gets a circle, and I expect her to just make sort of like a target or something. But she's got these like crazy sort of patterns and shapes going on inside of it. And it's like half of it is brown, and then it's like all these bright colors on one side. I'm just, you're a brilliant artist.
Yes. She has a brilliant mom. That's what.
Oh, yeah. So amazing. The other sort of just fun get to know you question that I always like to throw out there is, what is your favorite food? Your go-to food?
My favorite go-to food? Well, this is going to sound super lame, but macaroni and cheese from Luby's in the 90s was like my jam. Like that was the best. But I have gluten and dairy allergies, so I can't eat macaroni and cheese. But there's this microwavable macaroni and cheese, and it sounds bad, but it's gluten-free, dairy-free by Annie's. I think it's the company is Annie's. And it's like 2,000 calories. It's something not good for you. But like every now and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to have my microwave macaroni and cheese that is not macaroni or cheese. So that's my decadent little pleasure. Otherwise, it's a really nice salad. But,
yeah, those decadent foods, though, like I feel like it has to be, you know, a ridiculous amount of calories for it really to be the good stuff.
What is in it? But it is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, we love just the regular like Annie's mac and cheese, but that's our jam over here too.
Yeah, I mean, how can you go wrong with mac and cheese? You can add green chili to it. You can do so much stuff with it. Yeah.
Yeah, when I get really ambitious, I'll make homemade mac and cheese, but
wow.
I don't think that's happened for a few years.
Yeah, but homemade mac and cheese, that's a whole nother level. That's amazing.
It's so good. And then is there anything we kind of missed? Anything I should have asked but didn't get to?
I think we talked about a lot. I guess my biggest wish is that anyone who is listening who maybe is not able to give a lot of time to their own art practice, that maybe they use that as a form of self-care and maybe just start to add another hour a week of going to the studio. Because I mean, to me, that's also self-care. It's just being in that room with all the things and no expectation and not having to get it done. Just, we need more artists in the world. We need more people thinking that way. We need more happy people. I just wish for everyone to get to make art today. You know, that's my hope is every day we get to make just something for us, or I don't know, just makes the world a better place, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I know for me, it's definitely part of self-care.
Yes.
Very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it heals the world too. I don't know. I don't have the statistics yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, I kept seeing the sort of memes about art, like art is essential when we're talking about essential jobs and essential workers. And meanwhile, all the art funding is being thrashed.
Yes.
And saying, you know, how many songs have you listened to during this quarantine time? How many movies have you watched? Like, how many artworks have you been looking at on the computer? Art is essential. It's getting us through this.
It's essential. You know, it's innovation. It's the only way we're going to get through anything. Yeah. Creativity.
Yeah. I just did a project with fourth graders where we listened to the Linda Lindas. They're this amazing girl band in Los Angeles that, you know, they're actually still kids right now. They have a song called Missing You that they wrote during quarantine. That's just like, I miss my friends. Like, this is hard sort of message. But we listen to that and then just use art to get out any feelings that we have.
Oh,
and just talking with kids about that. Yeah. Like that art can be like, I ask them, I try to be very open-ended and I'm like, you know, what were they talking about in the song? Like, why do you think they would talk about something that doesn't make them feel so good? And their responses are amazing. They're just like, well, art can help you feel better. Art can help other people feel better and feel like less alone. I'm like, yes. Yeah. Art can help you get those feelings out. Art can, like, it's a way to talk about it with the world. I'm just like, you guys are amazing.
I mean, that's amazing because you're on the front lines, even if they never take another art course again. I mean, that's such a gift to give people. Yeah, I love that.
Those conversations are so incredible. So last couple things. Is there anyone you would want to kind of give a shout out to or thank?
Gosh, you know, there are literally, like, when I was on
so many
podcast, she was like, I was like reading off a paragraph. I mean, there's just so many people. I will not torture your listeners, but there, you know, I had an art teacher, Jacqueline St. Aubin, and she was just the most incredible. I had her in an undergrad and graduate school, and the reason why she just knew everything about painting and art and
Mm.
technical everything. She knew everything, but the way she handled critiques and the way she handled helping people to understand how to get to their strengths and how to see areas that were not working, she just modeled so much love and so much compassion and just, I mean, I feel like I just learned so much from her about how to be a better human, number one, but like how do you do that for somebody? How do you bring into their awareness something and help them? And she just always had so many words that like nuggets, so many great things. I remember teaching this class and being super frustrated with, a student, and then the student finally got this thing. And she said, people aren't ready to hear it until they're ready, little things like that. She just would reconstruct how I would approach things. She just came from it with so much compassion. So she's an incredible artist, Jacqueline St. Aubin. She also wrote a drawing book that I use still when I teach. It's amazing. Yeah. So she's who I'd give a shout out to for setting me on that path and showing me that, a way to help people, help artists with love.
Amazing. Yeah, that sounds like a big influence in the mindset shift that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. She was it. She was
that
doing
compassion.
Yeah. And you didn't even notice she was doing it. She was so good at it. So good.
I love it. Last thing, where can listeners connect with you online?
Well, just my name, IsadoraStowe.com. Stowe is the last name. Not too many people are named Isadora, so I'm very easy to find. I'm named after my grandfather, but so yeah, IsadoraStowe.com, and I'm on all the social media, all the things, just with my name because nobody has it. So I got really lucky with that. And yeah, I would love for any teachers or anyone to reach out with any questions they have. This was just so pleasurable getting to talk to you and talk about teaching and art, and just loved it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
For artists and teachers.
Thank you. It was, I feel like, so helpful and just, wonderful to talk with you too. And I will link to you, and everyone go check out Isadora's work. I know hearing about it, like I need the visuals. So go look at the visuals. Thank you, Isadora.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can reach me at Teaching Artist Podcast on Instagram or teachingartistpodcast@gmail.com. Who do you want to hear from? Please share your recommendations of teaching artists. And if you loved this episode, please subscribe, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow me. It really makes a big difference. Thank you.